Good evening and welcome to Taking the Stand, Freedom Advocacy Network podcast. I am filling in today as the host in Herman's absence. My name is Ben, and unfortunately this is the last time you guys will be seeing me. I am pursuing a career in law starting on Monday, so wish me luck. And today I'm joined by a very special guest, Sara Gon, who actually practiced as an attorney for 17 years. Sara, how are you?
I'm well, a bit out of touch on the practical side, let's put it that way.
Okay, but still wonderful to have you here. So in the last few weeks, Herman and I have been discussing the rule of law and the components of it. And I thought it would be great to get Sara in today because she recently wrote an article about the judiciary and its independence. So obviously, the separation of powers is one of the fundamental tenets of the rule of law and of democracy. And a very important aspect of the separation of powers is an independent judiciary. And it's something that we had to fight for during the years of apartheid, where it was uncertain whether we had an independent judiciary. So, Sara, what can you tell us about the JSC? What does it stand for, and what is its role in ensuring an independent judiciary?
Okay, the JSC stands for the Judicial Service Commission, and the role of the Judicial Service Commission is primarily to interview and recommend appointees to the various courts, to the High Courts, to the Supreme Court of Appeal, to the Constitutional Court, and also to administer conduct or misconduct rather of any complaint about the judiciary that comes its way. And that in broad strokes is its function. Now, the crucial thing about the JSC is it acts as the administrative body for the judiciary to ensure that it does stand as the third pillar of government. So you've got the legislature, which makes the laws, you've got the executive, which manages the laws basically, and the judiciary essentially interprets those laws and keeps, in other words, its role is to keep the other two sides of government in check. And it thus becomes very, very important, both as the third separate arm and as an independent third separate arm. And that's the JSC. That's the JSC in a nutshell.
Thanks. So recently, in about April or May this year, we needed to get some new judges in, and the JSC plays a crucial role in doing that and conducting the interviews of new incumbents into the judiciary. And so the JSC is headed up by Mogoeng, who is our Chief Justice. But it comprises of 23 people. Mm-hmm. But it seems as if it has quite a strong political presence. Is that true?
It does. It has a very strong political presence. There are 23 bodies or people represented from the Chief Justice down for the approval of what they do is they approve judges, which they put to the president for formally selecting. There's a 24th and a 25th, and that is the premier of a particular province that may be affected by appointments. In other words, provincial appointments to provincial courts, and the representative of the provincial legislature. Now, so the other 23 are constant, and the problem is that about, I can't remember, it's suddenly gone blank as to whether it's 14 or 15 of those people come from government. In other words, come from parliament, come from cabinet, and a minority, I think it's about 8, actually come from the professions. So the problem is that you've got a political majority which affects those decisions. And although the 3 major opposition parties are represented, they have a representative each. The ANC has 6 representatives, and then many of the other representatives will reflect will reflect the ANC. So as far as I'm concerned, in light of what has happened, there actually should be no political representation in the selection. I believe the selection can be left to representatives of the profession in all its guises, and they can make the decision or the proposal based on their knowledge and understanding of the various aspects of the profession. And what happened here is there were, I think, 2 places out open, one of which will be Mogoeng's position because he's retiring. And they have to do is present 5 options. In other words, 2 plus an additional 3. There must always be 3 more than there must be 3 more than 2, if I can put it that way. It increases as the amounts go up. And so essentially what the JSE should have presented to Cyril Ramaphosa was a list of 5, which had been deliberated on by the JSE, all 23 of them. Now, the furore broke out over the fact that the JSE, some of its constituent parts behaved appallingly badly. The one affected Judge Pillay, who is actually an acting Concourt judge at the moment, and they spent an enormous and unnecessary amount of time grilling her on her relationship with Minister Pravin Gordhan, which no one denied that the relationship exists. But what they were trying to do was create this picture that somehow his inquiring over her appointment a few years ago to the bench was improper, whether he had somehow manipulated it. And Julius Malema did his level best to make the whole thing fairly disgusting. And Mogoeng, as the Chief Justice, did nothing. In fact, not only did he not rein him in, but he aggravated the situation through his own very strange line of questioning. So that went on. Then the other really outrageous situation was that affecting advocate or judge now, David Unterhalter, who is recognized singularly as the finest legal brain we have. David is in a... And what they did with David is they, amongst other things, first of all, they questioned his position with regarding Israel and the 2-state solution, because he had served, no longer had, but had served as a board member of the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, which is largely performs a charitable function. And the interesting thing at the end of the day was that both of these, and among a couple of others, were not on the list that was presented to the president. And Mogoeng made a big hoo-ha about the fact that David Unterhalter had only been on the High Court bench for about 3 years. Now, the law provides that at least 4 of the judges, as they come onto the bench, at least 4 of the judges of the 11 must be judges before they get to the Concourt. Now, 9 of the 11 existing, or there aren't 11, there should be, but the 9 existing judges at the moment all were judges on the High Court. So there was no reason. I mean, David Unterhalter didn't even need to be a judge at all, let alone a judge with considerable experience. And Mogoeng seemed to have made up some sort of rule himself to exclude David Unterhalter by virtue of his lack of experience. And it was that sort of weird behavior. And then just to cap it all, and literally the cherry on the top, is when the Council for the Support of the Constitution decided to tackle this behavior and these decisions, or the lack of decisions, or whatever you would call it, they obtained the transcripts of the JSC deliberations. Now, the deliberations are not open to the public. The deliberations are done secretly. And what these deliberations showed is that there was no discussion. Mogoeng put down a list of 5, wouldn't discuss it, gave some very strange reasons for his exclusion of Pillay, and that was the end of that. And I mean, that makes a complete mockery of our judiciary. If at that level you're seeing what amounts to almost nursery school playground behavior. What really adds, I suppose, insult to injury is the fact that Mogoeng himself was a nominee of Jacob Zuma when he was president. And I think Mogoeng became the president of the Constitutional Court after only 2 years on the Constitutional Court.
That's correct, yeah.
And he had been in what was originally the Bophuthatswana High Court and then became Northwest. So distinguished is not the word I would use to describe him. And he came into that position ahead of, sorry, I've suddenly gone blank, Dikgang Moseneke, who'd both been on the Con Court for 9 years, 6 of which he'd been as a Deputy Chief Justice. So, and there was some controversy around him. The ANC stirred up a really nonsense controversy over him some years before, which effectively ruled him out of the decision-making process. And I assume that probably had something to do with what Jacob Zuma actually wanted in a Chief Justice.
Yeah, and I think that's quite interesting that you make that point about Jacob Zuma choosing a Chief Justice, which he thought would be more favorable to his sort of ideology or preference, because I recently wrote an article about the colored voters case, which happened in the 1950s. Mm-hmm. And this is also where the National Party tried to manipulate the appellate division, which was the highest court back in the day. Mm-hmm. And they chose Steyn as the new Chief Justice after Centrally, or whatever his name was, in front of Oliver Schreiner, who was the sort of shoe-in for the Chief Justice, because of Steyn was quite a big supporter of apartheid. So, you know, you can't really draw those parallels too closely, but the independence of the judiciary is something that can be eroded, and it needs to be sort of looked at, and really with quite a lot of what do you call it, vigor. You know, we have to defend the independence of the judiciary, because we see what happens when it isn't independent. Yeah. So, yeah. Would you want to add anything?
No, what I was just going to say is it's not exactly the same situation, but the terrible thing is it's not far off. And if you think that we all knew exactly where the Nats were coming from and what they were planning when they excluded somebody like Schreiner on behalf of Steyn, and the fact that it's happening in a democratic South Africa for essentially similar reasons should have us very worried, because what's terrible is the fact that one wonders whether someone like David Onthalter was excluded at the end of the day because he is an intellectual giant. So, in other words, perhaps Mogoeng didn't want him to make anyone else look bad, which is a terrible reason for lowering the standards that you can have to the bench when you could have someone of David Onthalter's talent.
And David Onthalter, anyone who's studied law knows that he is a genius. So, yeah, quite worrying. And it's something that people who value freedom should pay attention to, the protection of an independent judiciary.
Absolutely.
Sara, we have a minute or so left. Is there anything more you'd like to add?
Just to say that, you know, the reason one cannot underestimate the importance is because although judges are appointed, they're not elected, the process for interviewing and nominating them is fairly rigorous, and there's no doubt one of the hallmarks that South Africa has been able to present to the international world is that independent judiciary of what has been, it's a little variable now, but it has been of a high standard for some years during our democracy. And to lose that is probably would be the death knell of democracy. So the independence of the judiciary and the quality of the judiciary, we have it and we can grow it, and it's terribly important that we do. It says everything about us.
Sara, thank you so much for joining me today. All of you at home, thanks for watching. And remember, your freedom is worth fighting for. Cheerio.